if money is making the decision here, then ultimately Florida, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama, if they're getting tired of Kentucky and South Carolina and Ole Miss and Mississippi State getting the same amount of money, don't be surprised if that happens in the future. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master Football, back at it again. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be updated on all things EA college football, subscribe to this channel right now. I also do some college football, pro football, and Madden videos as well. Please hit the subscribe button. Again, it's free to you, okay? It helps me out a lot. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'd really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, guys, here I am again, and this might be one of the last videos I have up here in Sealy Lake, Montana. I'm having a great time up here. It is absolutely gorgeous, but we have so much news on the college football front. There's a lot we got to talk about here. I'm telling you right now, the good thing is, again, tonight the Raiders are going to play, so that's going to be huge. Okay, got to watch them, even though none of their starters are going to play, but we'll get some football. Football is back, my friends. It's back. And you can see that too, because all these conference media days in college football are happening. There's a lot of movement. USC and UCLA go to the Big Ten, and now there's just rumors galore, because remember last year we had this same situation again. The I-8 is going to get split apart after Texas and Oklahoma left. Everything's kind of up in the air. Well, I've made a couple videos about this recently. Go check those out. And again, they're great videos. I know I'm saying my own videos are great, but you know what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of good information on there. However, our dear friend, Mr. Dennis Dodd, who has been on top of a lot of this stuff, just had an article yesterday that is going to provide a lot of context for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Again, there's a lot of situations that are being discussed that are more popular on Twitter than they are with ADs and executives. Let's get into that article really quickly. There's a lot to discuss in this article, so let's get into it right now. So again, yesterday from Dennis Dodd, conference realignment, Big Ten interest in additional Pac-12 teams has cooled, Big 12 positioned well. So first thing I want to discuss with this article is he actually brought it back to a big-time gamble by former Big Ten AD Jim Delaney. There's a big reason why we've reached another conference realignment crossroads. It centers around a 51-year-old media executive who has been pulling the strings behind the scenes for a while. No matter how this round of reorganization ends, Mark Shapiro will have a significant stake. The president of Endeavor, a powerful global sports entertainment and content company, is currently advising the Big 12 on its next media rights deal after its current agreement expires ahead of the 2025 season. You already know the Big 12 is in the middle of rearranging itself for the second straight summer as it gazes westward to possibly grab some Pac-12 members. At the same time, the college athletics is anticipating the Big Ten's new media rights contract, expected to be announced any day. It could be the largest in history. There have been some expectations that'll be closer to Labor Day, but again, it could happen any day now, but we'll see what he has to say here. Those two things are not unrelated. Back in 2004, Shapiro, then an ESPN executive, offered prior Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney a take it or leave it deal to renew with the worldwide leader in sports. Delaney refused amid what he perceived to be a lowball offer. Shapiro says, "You're rolling the dice," and Delaney said, "Consider them rolled." Delaney further monetized his conference rights by taking them in-house and starting his own channel. The Big Ten Network has been wildly successful to the point that subsequent conference expansions to Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers contributed to that success. Those moves provided more content for the network, as well as the linear cable partners Fox and ESPN. So think about that. Back in the day, ESPN lowballed him, and he's like, nah, I believe in myself, I believe in the conference. Went ahead, added Nebraska, added Maryland and Rutgers. Maryland and Rutgers give you, again, DC and New York. So you added those to the conference, created its own network, and basically the Big Ten has been on the forefront for a lot of these moves recently. So they are doing a lot of stuff there. And again, he already mentions here too that the Big Ten is on the brink of signing a $1 billion plus annual media rights deal. Some schools are projected to get anywhere from $80 to $100 million per year to be in the Big Ten. So it talks about Shapiro and the fact that he is now with Endeavor Sports, and again, he's working with the Big 12, and it says right here, when talking about the Texas and Oklahoma leaving, he states that the numbers actually look like they favor us, not by a huge amount. This is not like comparing Texas to Texas State, but there seems to be a noticeable difference. So Shapiro, Delaney started a lot of this back in the day, and again, this is always happening because this next portion of this article actually talks about kind of a previous situation with 16 team conferences and beyond that too. So it mentions here that further expansion could create legal problems. So again, right here, what it's talking about here with the Big Ten and the SEC, they are both going to be in 2025 at 16 members. But remember here that Carl Benson, the former commissioner of the old WAC, he says, beware of legal ramifications of expanding beyond 16 teams. So he, from 1998 to 1996, was the 16-member commissioner for the WAC before the league collapsed on itself because, surprise, the money didn't stretch far enough. And again, we see here that what happened here with this is the Mountain West's Wikipedia page. The creation of the Mountain West was a delayed after effect of the 1996 NCAA conference realignment, which had initially been triggered 2 years earlier when the Big 8 conference agreed to merge with 4 members of the Southwest Conference. I want to make sure everybody knows that. At the end of the day, push comes to shove, just blame Texas. They're probably the reason why all this stuff happened. But they had 10 members, then they added to at least 12. And then they added even more. They added 3 of the 4 Southwest schools who left the merger. And then they added 3 others to get to 16 Big West Conference members, San Jose State, UNLV, and then Tulsa, who was an independent. And then eventually it got to the point to where in spring 1998, BYU and Utah proposed a permanent split into 2 18 divisions. The proposal would have forced some schools into an unnatural alignment. Air Force threatened to go independent. And then ultimately it went to the presidents for Air Force, BYU, Colorado State, Utah, and Wyoming met at Denver. And they wanted to form their new individual conference. They invited New Mexico and San Diego State and UNLV to join them in what would become the Mountain West Conference. Now, in my personal opinion, I think that could happen. Again, if money is making the decision here, then ultimately Florida, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama, if they're getting tired of Kentucky and South Carolina and Ole Miss and Mississippi State getting the same amount of money, don't be surprised if that happens in the future. But again, we're a long way away from that right now. We're still in the situation where we've got other things we have to look forward to. But basically, Carl Benson, past 16 members, the money gets stretched a long way. There's a lot of things you got to worry about. And it also says here, too, this is interesting from Carl Benson. He says that if the Big Ten gutted a conference and took Cal and Stanford, Washington, and Oregon, if I was the Pac-12 commissioner, George Kliavkoff, I might pursue antitrust action there. So here we are on Investopedia, understanding what antitrust laws are. So key takeaways from antitrust laws are they are statutes developed by governments to protect consumers from predatory business practices and ensure fair competition. Antitrust laws are applied to a wide range of questionable business activities, including market allocation, bid rigging, price fixing, and monopolies. One of those down here, when you come down here, you check out market allocation. Market allocation is a scheme devised by 2 entities to keep the business activities to specific geographic territories or consumers. This scheme can also be called a regional monopoly. 2 entities keep their business activities to specific geographic regions and territories or types of customers. Does that sound like anything right now? Maybe the Big Ten and the SEC? I don't know. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I wouldn't say that, but I know that it's starting to bleed over into that territory here where you can see something like this. So this one right here, this next part of this article is really, really interesting, talking about the Big 12 interest in or has cooled on Pac-12 teams. After the anxiety caused last week regarding further Big Ten expansion, industry sources have indicated that the Big Ten is no longer, I believe no longer for now, as interested in California, Oregon, Stanford, and Washington. Rights holders were balking at paying the same amount to these schools as the 16 Big Ten schools going forward, $80 to $100 million in total revenue. While those 4 programs may eventually have options, the Big Ten is concentrating on its new deal in 2023 while trying to lure Notre Dame, which has an open invitation. More and more stakeholders now believe the Fighting Irish will ultimately stay independent. I think that's true probably in the short term, but I think in the long term, again, if Notre Dame pulls in $75 million, which is what the reported number that they want to get to, if they pull in $75 million, and then Illinois, who's not too far, actually Northwestern, who's not too far away from them, they pull in $125 million eventually, or $150 million in a couple years, I think that they ultimately will decide to join the Big Ten, but we're not there just yet. But those other 4, the Bay Area schools, and then the Northwest, Washington and Oregon, looks like right now that they're just not quite sure about that. Again, we'll see. That new media rights deal comes out, and the media rights, they say, you know what, let's get those markets. Let's get the Bay Area. Let's get Seattle. Let's get Portland. That might happen, but looks like it might be cooling off a little bit. Another thing here is it says opportunity lost. So last year, the Pac-12 had an opportunity to add Big 12 teams. They ultimately said no. Now remember, it was an 8-4 vote. So think about those. It was 8-4 vote against taking any Big 12 schools. And I bet that 2 of those against were probably USC and UCLA, who now bolted. Look at this thing down here. We would have jumped one Big 12 AD told CBS Sports in reference to the Pac-12's interest in getting into Texas. So back then, before they had added Houston, it was, what is that? That's Baylor, TCU, and then Texas Tech. Those teams, I bet would be Texas Tech, Public University, maybe TCU, something like that. But they were that close. But 2 of those no votes are now leaving the conference, and we'll just see what's going on. I mean, this is what conference realignment is, man. It's always like that. Another thing here, too, that I wanted to bring up was the fact that the Pac-12's late night time zone, their abilities with that Pac-12 after dark, is a huge aspect of why not only they added USC and UCLA for the Los Angeles market, but in addition to the fact that they can go out there and be able to have games played late at night, so that the Big Ten can have game football from big noon all the way until 2 in the morning East Coast Standard Time, so 14 straight hours of football. Again, that's probably the reason why they're out there. I wouldn't be surprised if they added a mountain team. I actually had a video on that recently here. But that's a big factor behind the Pac-12 is eventually, you like those earlier games, it's easier on you, but I'm a Mountain West time zone team. Boise State plays games at 8:30 local time, and it's not as fun as you'd love the game to be at, like, 5 or something like that, or like noon or something like that. But unfortunately, the people who sign your checks want your game at 8:30, your game is at 8:30. I want to bring up this last point right here where he says the Big 12 remains well positioned. So the Big 12 and the ACC are in a weird situation where they're both in solid situations, but for completely different reasons. The ACC is solid right now because their grant of rights is untouchable. There's nothing you can do. They can't leave until 2036. Somebody might be able to make some movement there, but there's no reports out there that have said that, they've gotten the necessary 8 votes to get out of that deal. The Big 12, on the other hand, is in a good spot because the 12 members they have, nobody wants them, in terms of nobody meaning the SEC, the Big 10, and then the Pac-12, reportedly. Again, we don't know, but nobody wants them, so they're kind of solidified. So if some teams were to come over from the Pac-12, they have a solid landing ground where they can be for the foreseeable future. Whereas if somebody leaves for the Pac-12, they might get more money in the short term, but that conference could be blown up basically whenever the Big 10 decides to raid them. So the Big 12 is in a solid spot because they're solidified, they know what they are, and they basically can just kind of play it by ear from right now. But the Pac-12, although they might technically have a little bit more viewership, everybody wants out of that conference. Everybody wants to go to the Big 10, and it's all hell in a handbasket. But, well, according to George Kliavkov, everything's going to be solid. But we'll see in the coming weeks here, especially what happens after that Big 10 deal, whether or not they want to add those schools out west or not. All right, guys, so that is the end of this video here. I appreciate everything there. Get in the comments right now. What are your opinions on all of this college realignment stuff? Because there is stuff all over the place. I mean, what do you think about the report that Oregon and Washington, Cal, and Stanford aren't necessarily being to be invited over into the Big 10 just yet? What do you think about this fact that the Big 12 is ironically kind of in a position of strength 1 year later, considering the fact that they thought they were going to get completely, pillaged or something like that? Get in the comments. Let me know about all this stuff right now. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'd appreciate it. I'll see you guys later. I am out.